The prestigious halls of the Galactic Combat Academy aboard Station Nexus 7 had seen many peculiar sights in its millennia of existence, but none quite as amusing as the current spectacle unfolding in its central administrative chamber. Master Zara, a Cytherian whose serpentine form practically radiated ancient wisdom and just a touch of smug superiority, was currently experiencing what humans would call an absolute meltdown. Absolutely not. The Master's scales shifted through various shades of purple, a clear sign of distress among Cytherians. We cannot possibly accept a Deathworlder into our advanced combat programs. The way Zara spat out the word Deathworlder made it sound like a particularly nasty curse word in at least 17 different languages. Standing before the flustered Master was the cause of all this chaos: Zara, the Hurricane Chen, 5 feet and 8 inches of pure human stubbornness, complete with a grin that could only be described as shit-eating. She maintained a perfect pose of respect, though anyone paying attention to her eyes might catch the occasional twitch of barely contained laughter. With all due respect, Master Zara, the Academy's AI administrator, Nexus, chimed in with its maddeningly calm voice. MS, Chen's application meets all our criteria. In fact, her preliminary test scores are rather remarkable. Remarkable, another instructor, a Caxthari warrior with 4 arms and what appeared to be permanent scowl etched into their crystalline face, scoffed. She completed the preliminary combat forms in minutes. It's obviously a malfunction in the testing systems. Zara cleared her throat, still maintaining that insufferable pose of respect. Actually, I found the forms quite intuitive, especially the 7th kata of the Celestial Dragon. It's just physics, really, once you understand the principles of momentum conservation and angular velocity. Physics Master Zara's scales now cycled through colors faster than a malfunctioning disco ball. The 7th kata is a sacred form passed down through 15 generations of Cytherian masters. It's not physics. The human's response was to simply demonstrate the form, a move that should have been impossible without the Cytherian's natural flexibility. Yet somehow, through what the aliens could only assume was some sort of Deathworld black magic, she executed it flawlessly. Zara said, completing the movement with a flourish that was definitely not part of the traditional form. It's all about understanding the center of mass and proper weight distribution. Though I have to admit, having actual bones instead of a semi-fluid skeletal structure like yours makes it a bit trickier. Had to compensate with some core muscle engagement. The room fell into a stunned silence, broken only by what sounded suspiciously like a snicker from the AI's speakers. Master Zara's scales had settled on a pale shade of green, the Cytherian equivalent of a horrified blank stare. The application is accepted, Nexus announced cheerfully, clearly enjoying the chaos. Welcome to the Galactic Combat Academy, MS Chen. I'm sure your stay here will be educational for everyone involved. Zara bowed perfectly, though the gesture was somewhat undermined by her barely suppressed grin. Thank you, Masters. I look forward to learning your ancient and sacred arts, and maybe sharing a few Deathworld perspectives on the laws of physics. Master Zara's only response was a sound that could best be transcribed as meep. Word had spread through Station Nexus 7 faster than a quantum entanglement transmission. By the time Zara arrived at her first advanced training session, the observation deck was packed with an array of beings that looked like a fever dream of an evolutionary biologist after too much caffeine. The training arena itself was a marvel of engineering, a massive circular platform surrounded by holographic projectors and gravity manipulators. Today, however, it more closely resembled a circus tent, with spectators of all shapes and sizes craning various appendages to get a better view of the infamous human. Oh good, an audience, Zara muttered, stretching her shoulders. Because this wasn't going to be awkward enough already. The gathered species were a testament to the diversity of combat traditions in the galaxy. There were the Etherian light dancers, whose crystalline bodies channeled pure energy into devastating attack patterns. Their movements were so precise that a single misplaced step could theoretically trigger a small nuclear fusion reaction. Several of them were currently placing bets on how long the human would last before accidentally vaporizing herself. Next to them stood a group of quantum monks from the Helix Nebula, beings of pure probability who had spent centuries perfecting the art of being in multiple places simultaneously through sheer meditation. They watched Zara with all their potential states at once, which was giving her a slight headache. The gravitational wrestlers of Thorax Prime, massive beings who manipulated local gravity fields as casually as humans might throw a punch, took up an entire section of the viewing area. Their centuries-old tradition of combat involved moves that could only be properly executed in crushing gravity fields that would turn most species into organic paste. Quite the turnout, commented Master K. Ziarth of the Void Stalkers, his gaseous form rippling with barely contained amusement. I haven't seen this many masters gathered since the great tournament of the 7th cycle. Master Vix Thara slithered into the arena, scales now a confident shade of gold. Indeed, it seems appropriate to have witnesses for what I'm about to propose. The Cytherian master's voice carried across the arena with theatrical precision. Mess Chen, your unorthodox approach to our sacred arts has caused quite a stir. If by stir you mean existential crisis, Zara replied cheerfully, then yes, I noticed. The quantum monks are currently existing in a superposition of outrage and fascination. It's quite impressive, actually. A ripple of something between amusement and scandal went through the crowd. The quantum monks flickered in embarrassment. You treat our traditions as mere physical exercises, Vix Thara continued, ignoring the interruption. Thousands of years of spiritual and martial refinement, reduced to your primitive understanding of physics and biomechanics. To be fair, Zara interjected, physics and biomechanics have been working pretty well for us primitives. They got us off our death world and into space before we managed to kill ourselves, which I call a win. Master Vix Thara's scales rippled with irritation. Then perhaps you'd care to put your methodology to the test. I propose a challenge, Ms. Chen. In one standard rotation cycle, you will demonstrate mastery of 3 of our most advanced techniques: the Cytherian Shadow Walk, the Quantum Monk's Probability Strike, and the Gravitational Wrestler's Singularity Throw. The arena erupted in shocked whispers. Even Nexus's ever-present hum seemed to stutter for a moment. Each of these techniques, Vix Thara continued with obvious satisfaction, traditionally requires decades, if not centuries, of dedicated study. If you can truly reduce our sacred arts to mere physical principles, surely you can master them in a day. Zara looked around the arena, taking in the impossible array of alien martial arts masters, each representing traditions older than human civilization. Then she did something that made several of the more sensitive psychic species in the audience wince in anticipation. She smiled. Master Vix Thara, Zara said, bowing with exactly the right degree of respect to be slightly insulting, I accept your challenge, but I have one condition. The Cytherian scales flickered with curiosity, and that would be, when I succeed, you have to let me teach you how to do a proper human backflip, for cultural exchange purposes. The horror on Master Vix Thara's face was worth every second of the awkward silence that followed. Agreed, the Cytherian master finally managed, though their scales had taken on a distinctly queasy hue. Your training begins now. Excellent, Zara clapped her hands together. Now, about that shadow walk technique, I've been thinking about the quantum tunneling principles involved, and I have some theories about optimizing the probability field through proper hip alignment. The sound of multiple alien martial arts masters groaning in unison echoed through the station's halls. The Cytherian Shadow Walk Master Vix Thara began with ceremonial gravity, is a technique that requires perfect harmony between mind, body, and the quantum uncertainty of reality itself. Our species' unique bioelectrical field allows us to. Quick question, Zara interrupted, squinting at the Cytherian master who was currently half-phased through a training dummy. Are you manipulating your cellular membrane potential to create a localized quantum tunneling effect, or is it more of a temporary phase shift through probability manipulation? The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of a quantum monk choking on their probability shake. Master Vix Thara's scales cycled through several colors before settling on a puzzled mauve. What? Never mind, I think I figured it out, Zara said, pulling out what appeared to be a pocket calculator. It's definitely quantum tunneling. The way your scales shimmer in the ultraviolet spectrum during the technique is a dead giveaway. Give me a minute to run some quick calculations. A group of junior Cytherian students watched from the sidelines, their scales collectively displaying various shades of smugness. They had been practicing the shadow walk for decades, and none had managed more than a partial phase shift. Watching this presumptuous human try to reduce their sacred art to mathematics was prime entertainment. The thing about Cytherians, Zara continued, now pacing and gesturing with her calculator, is that your nervous system produces a natural bioelectric field that's about 3 times stronger than a human's. That's what lets you do the whole graceful serpentine movement thing. But theoretically, if a human were to generate enough bioelectric potential through rapid muscle contractions in the right sequence. She stopped pacing and took what appeared to be a completely incorrect stance for shadow walking. MS. Chen, that is not the proper Master Vex, Zara began. Zara vanished. Well, not exactly vanished. For a brief moment she existed as a probability cloud of possible positions, much like an electron in an atomic orbital. Then she reappeared 3 meters to the left, looking slightly dizzy but decidedly solid. Wow, she said, shaking her head. That's way more disorienting than I expected. It's like being everywhere and nowhere at once, but with more nausea. Did you know you can taste colors during the quantum transition? Also, I think I briefly understood the meaning of life, but it went away when I rematerialized. Hold on. Let me try again with a slight modification to the muscle sequence. The junior Cytherian scales had collectively turned the pale green of utter disbelief. Impossible, Master Vix. Zara's voice had risen several octaves. The bioelectric field requirements alone. Oh, that part's easy, Zara interrupted, now randomly appearing and disappearing around the training area like some sort of quantum hiccup. Humans have this neat trick called adrenaline response if you trigger it just right while controlling your breathing and muscle tension. Pop. Instant bioelectric field enhancement. Though I have to admit, your way is probably more energy efficient. This is giving me one heck of a workout. A quantum monk in the observation area was frantically recording readings on a probability meter, which was displaying numbers that by all rights should have caused it to explode. But the spiritual aspect, Master Vix, Zara tried again, is absolutely fascinating. Zara appeared right next to the master, causing them to jump slightly. The way the technique interfaces with quantum reality really makes you think about the nature of consciousness and determination, doesn't it? By the way, I think I figured out why your junior students are having trouble. They're trying to maintain too many quantum states at once. If they just focused on a binary probability distribution instead of the full quantum wave function. The junior students, who had been smugly awaiting the human's failure, were now frantically taking notes. This is not how this was supposed to go, Master Vex, Zara muttered, scales showing a complex pattern that roughly translated to experiencing existential crisis. Oh, and watch this, Zara exclaimed with the enthusiasm of a child who had just discovered a new toy. She proceeded to combine the shadow walk with what appeared to be breakdancing. The resulting display looked like someone had somehow taught quantum mechanics to perform street choreography. Is she quantum tunneling to the beat of ancient human music? One of the junior students whispered in horrified awe. I believe that's staying alive by the BG's nexus helpfully provided, its speakers somehow managing to convey both amusement and academic interest. Master Vix, Zara watched as their sacred technique, refined over centuries of dedicated practice and spiritual enlightenment, was being used to perform what appeared to be a quantum-enhanced moonwalk. We still have 2 more techniques to master today, the master said weakly. Perhaps we should move on to the probability strike. Great idea. Zara reappeared, slightly out of breath but grinning. I have some thoughts about applying Heisenberg's uncertainty principle to combat situations. But first, does anyone have a sports drink? Quantum tunneling really dehydrates you. The quantum monks exchanged worried glances. Their technique was next, and somehow they knew things were about to get even more interesting. Zara sat cross-legged in the center of the training arena, surrounded by holographic diagrams of probability waves and quantum state calculations. To the horror of the traditional practitioners watching, she was eating a protein bar while simultaneously manipulating a complex mathematical model of the probability strike technique with her free hand. The thing these guys don't get, she thought while chewing contemplatively, is that humans have been adapting other species' techniques since we figured out how to sharpen sticks. The quantum monks hovered nearby, their forms flickering between states of anxiety and fascination as they watched her work. Their probability strike technique was supposed to be a mystical art form requiring decades of meditation to master. Yet here was this human, treating it like a particularly interesting physics problem. So Zara said aloud, causing several monks to jump in multiple probability states simultaneously. If we consider the observer effect in quantum mechanics, then the traditional stance for the probability strike is actually limiting its potential. She stood up, brushing protein bar crumbs off her training uniform. Watch this. Traditional form first. Zara moved through the prescribed motions of the probability strike, her form perfect but deliberately slow. As she did, the air around her fist began to shimmer with quantum possibilities. See, the traditional form assumes you need to maintain conscious control over all possible strike points. She paused, grinning. But what if we just let chaos theory do the heavy lifting? Master K. Zorth of the Void Stalkers tilted his gaseous form in confusion. Chaos theory? In a precision quantum technique? That's completely. Zara launched into motion. Instead of the careful, measured movements of the traditional form, she flowed like water, her strikes becoming a blur of probability clouds. Each punch existed in multiple states simultaneously, but instead of trying to control each state, she was somehow riding the wave of quantum uncertainty itself. It's just like surfing, she thought. If the wave was made of quantum probability and could exist in 11 dimensions at once. Impossible, one of the senior quantum monks exclaimed, their form splitting into 7 different states of disbelief. She's achieving higher probability coherence than our most advanced masters, but her technique is completely wrong. Not wrong, Zara corrected, still moving through her modified form. Just adapted for human limitations and advantages. We can't naturally exist in multiple states like you can, but we're really good at rolling with chaos. Watch this. She launched into a combination that mixed the probability strike with elements of human martial arts. The result was something that made several physics professors watching from the observation deck burst into tears. See, human muscle memory works differently than your quantum state memory, she explained, casually existing in 3 places at once while maintaining a normal conversation. We can't hold as many positions simultaneously, but we can chain them together really fast. So instead of trying to exist everywhere at once, I'm just existing in sequence, really quickly. The growing tension in the room was palpable. Traditional practitioners were watching centuries of doctrine being casually rewritten by someone who had learned their sacred art in hours. The funny thing is, Zara mused as she continued her demonstration, they're so focused on the proper way to do things, they've missed some really obvious improvements. Also, she added out loud, has anyone ever tried combining the probability strike with the shadow walk? Because theoretically. Do not, Master Vix, Zara shouted, scales flashing warning colors. But it was too late. Zara vanished into quantum uncertainty, only to reappear striking from multiple angles simultaneously, each strike carrying the full probability field of the quantum monk's technique. The effect was like watching someone try to punch you from every possible angle in every possible timeline at once. Fascinating, she exclaimed, returning to normal space-time. The quantum fields actually stabilize each other, though I think I just accidentally proved string theory. Sorry about that, physicists. In the observation deck, a team of theoretical physicians was frantically recording everything they could, while the traditional martial arts masters watched in mounting horror as their carefully preserved techniques were being deconstructed, reconstructed, and improved upon by someone who kept making references to human activities like skateboarding and parkour. This is just the beginning, Zara said, her eyes gleaming with the kind of enthusiasm that made Master Vix Zara's scales turn preemptively pale. Wait until you see what happens when we apply fluid dynamics principles to the gravitational wrestler's techniques. The gravitational wrestlers in the audience collectively took a step back, which, given their massive size, caused the entire station to tilt slightly. The final hours before the demonstration had turned the training arena into something resembling a cross between a physics lab and a doomsday preparation center. Alien masters from various traditions huddled in corners, watching as Zara casually violated what they had previously thought were immutable laws of both physics and propriety. Okay, so if we take the gravitational field manipulation, Zara muttered, hovering upside down in a localized gravity well while simultaneously existing in 3 quantum states, and combine it with the momentum conservation principles of the shadow walk. Please stop, begged Master Krog of the gravitational wrestlers, his massive form shuddering. Those techniques were never meant to be combined. The gravitational feedback alone could create a localized space-time distortion. Yes, Zara finished enthusiastically. But that's only if you try to maintain both fields separately. If you harmonize them using the same principles as a gyroscope. She spun in place, the gravity well around her twisting into shapes that made geometry teachers in the observation deck cover their eyes. A junior quantum monk approached Master Vix Zara, their form flickering with concern. Master, she's starting to understand the techniques better than we do. This morning she explained my probability field misalignment using something called interpretive dance, and now my strikes are 43% more accurate. She taught the Etherean light dancers to enhance their energy channeling by crowd surfing, another instructor added, their crystalline form vibrating with distress. I don't even know what that means, but their power output has doubled. Meanwhile, Zara had moved on to teaching a group of void stalkers how to improve their gaseous form manipulation through what she called breakdance windmills. The sight of normally dignified gaseous beings spinning on their upper atmospheres was causing several traditional masters to consider early retirement. Everyone, please gather round, Zara called out, finally returning to normal gravity and singular existence. I want to show you something amazing. You know how the gravitational wrestlers create localized gravity wells? Well, if you modify the field shape using principles from human skateboarding. She proceeded to ride a gravity well across the training area like a wave, while simultaneously quantum tunneling through solid objects and maintaining a probability field that made her exist in multiple states of radical awesomeness at once. Is that physically possible? One of the physics professors whispered. Not until about 5 minutes ago, Nexus replied cheerfully. The rising panic among the instructors reached new heights when Zara began teaching a group of junior students how to combine all three techniques using principles from human parkour. The result was a display that made several master physicists resign on the spot, claiming they needed to rewrite all their textbooks. "Oh," Zara exclaimed suddenly, causing several nearby masters to flinch. "I just had an idea. You know how the Cytherean scales generate bioelectrical fields? Well, humans can create similar fields through static electricity. Watch this." She proceeded to demonstrate by sliding across the training room floor in her socks, generating enough static electricity to temporarily achieve a state similar to the Cytherean's natural abilities. The fact that her hair was now standing on end and she was slightly glowing only seemed to add to her enthusiasm. Chen, Master Vix, Zara interrupted, their scales showing a color that hadn't been seen since the Great Confusion of the Third Age. "The demonstration is in 1 hour. Perhaps you could stop innovating? Just for a little while." "But I haven't even shown you how to combine the probability strike with human capoeira," yet Zara protested. "Did you know you can achieve quantum superposition through handstands?" The sound of multiple martial arts masters groaning in unison was interrupted by Nexus's announcement, "Attention all personnel. Due to unprecedented violations of physics in Training Arena 7, we will be temporarily rewriting our understanding of quantum mechanics. Please update your scientific paradigms accordingly." Zara beamed at the increasingly distressed crowd of masters. "Don't worry, everyone. For the demonstration, I'll stick to the basics. Just the quantum gravitational phase shifting combination moves. Nothing too fancy." The way she said "nothing too fancy" made several masters consider calling their insurance providers to check if their policies covered human-induced reality restructuring. The Galactic Combat Council chamber hummed with anticipation and no small amount of trepidation. The normally austere room had been reinforced with additional quantum stabilizers, gravity dampeners, and what appeared to be several just-in-case temporal paradox insurance policies. The council members, representing the most ancient and respected martial traditions in the galaxy, sat in their elevated observation pods. Their expressions ranged from scholarly interest to barely concealed existential dread. Demonstration participant Zara Chen announced, the council's chief administrator, a being of pure energy trapped in ceremonial armor. "You will now demonstrate mastery of the three techniques as challenged. Begin with the Cytherean shadow walk." Master Vix, Zara watched from their position among the judges, scales shifting between anticipation and resignation. The past day had been educational in ways they hadn't thought possible. Zara stepped into the demonstration circle and bowed. Then she did something that made several council members activate their emergency quantum shields. She smiled. "Honorable Council," she began, her voice carrying the kind of confidence that made insurance adjusters wake up in cold sweats. "Rather than demonstrate these techniques separately, I propose a practical application combining all three." Before anyone could object, she launched into motion. It started with the shadow walk, but not like any shadow walk the council had ever seen. She quantum tunneled through space in a complex pattern that spelled out "Hello Council" in perfectly executed cursive. "As you can see," she explained, while casually existing in multiple states of reality, the shadow walk's quantum tunneling effect can be enhanced when combined with the probability strike's uncertainty field. She demonstrated by throwing a punch that seemed to connect from every possible angle in every possible timeline, while simultaneously phase shifting through solid matter. The effect was like watching someone try to high-five the fabric of reality itself. "But the real magic happens when you add in the gravitational wrestler's techniques," she continued, her voice now coming from multiple points in space-time simultaneously. Master Vix, Zara's scales had settled into a shade of fascinated horror as they watched their sacred technique being used as part of what appeared to be a physics-defying dance routine. The realization was slowly dawning that they hadn't just underestimated humans, they had fundamentally misunderstood what it meant to adapt. Zara was now manipulating gravity wells like they were dance partners, using them to enhance her quantum states while simultaneously existing in multiple probability fields. The effect was like watching someone perform a solo quantum tango with the laws of physics. The key, she explained while casually violating several previously thought immutable laws of reality, is understanding that these techniques aren't separate disciplines, they're all just different ways of asking the universe to bend a little. And if there's one thing humans are good at, it's finding new ways to bend rules. The council chamber had fallen into a stunned silence, broken only by the sound of several reality monitoring devices giving up and displaying error 404 physics not found. In their judge's pod, Master Vix Zara was experiencing what humans would call an epiphany. These techniques, these sacred arts they had spent centuries perfecting. Humans didn't just learn them, they improved them. Not through centuries of meditation or careful preservation of tradition, but through that uniquely human combination of innovation, adaptation, and what Zara had earlier termed winging it. As Zara concluded her demonstration with a move that simultaneously broke 3 laws of physics and 2 of thermodynamics, the master's scale shifted to a color that hadn't been seen in 10,000 years, the deep blue of profound respect, tinged with just a hint of what have we gotten ourselves into. As the echoes of Zara's demonstration faded, she turned to face the council with the kind of grin that had probably preceded several major evolutionary leaps in human history. And for my final demonstration, she announced, causing several council members to grip their seats, I'd like to show you something that perfectly exemplifies the human approach to your sacred arts. She took a stance that somehow combined elements of all 3 techniques while simultaneously looking completely wrong for all of them. Master Vix Zara's scales began displaying emergency colors. You see, Zara continued, as reality began to bend around her, humans have this unique trait. We don't just adapt to our environment, we make the environment adapt to us. And when we learn something new, she began to move, her form blurring between quantum states while riding gravitational waves like cosmic surfboard. We can't help but ask, yes, but what if we did it this way? What followed was technically impossible by 17 different schools of physics. Zara combined the Cytherean's phase shifting with the quantum monk's probability manipulation, all while riding a self-generated gravitational wave that she was somehow steering with her feet. The effect was like watching someone skateboard through quantum mechanics while high-fiving alternate timelines. The mathematical probability of this working is approximately 0.1, council member whispered. Exactly, Zara replied, her voice echoing from multiple quantum states. But here's the thing about humans and impossible probabilities, we tend to treat them as suggestions rather than rules. She landed in the center of the chamber, the various fields and forces settling around her like reluctantly tamed physics. That's not how any of this is supposed to work, another council member stammered. No, Master Vix Zara agreed, their scales now showing a complex pattern that roughly translated to enlightened resignation, but perhaps that's exactly what makes it brilliant. The council chamber erupted in a chaos of voices and quantum fluctuations. In the midst of it all, Zara turned to Master Vix Zara with a grin. So she said, about that backflip lesson I was promised. The master's scales shifted to a color that perfectly matched the human emotion of oh no. The human wins, declared the chief administrator, their energy form flickering with what might have been amusement. May the galaxy have mercy on our physics textbooks.